Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're dissecting the dark, uncompromising mechanics of a supernatural pact. We're going to examine the genuinely chilling story of a man named Ajitesh from Kanpur and look closely at what actually happens when a human being tries to rewrite their destiny using forces they don't fully understand. It's a fascinating and honestly terrifying look at the anatomy of a curse, the real price of sudden wealth, and the devastating consequences of breaking a supernatural contract. Okay, so let's dive right in. Picture this. A freezing winter night in Govindnagar. The streets are just thick with fog. Out of the mist walks this strange old tantric. He's got long white hair, a hunched back, and two pitch-black crows resting completely silently on his shoulders. As he walks, he's shouting this exact phrase into the empty streets. "Change your broken destiny. I know the secret to changing fate." Now, most people just hid behind their windows, but one man, lying awake, staring at his cracked ceiling, decided to listen. Actually, before we follow him into the dark, I want to show you where this story ends today. If you go to Govindnagar right now, you'll find an abandoned, completely ruined house. And circling endlessly above it, or just perching on its crumbling walls, are hundreds of crows. They're just waiting for the next foolish soul. To understand exactly how a family home became a cursed ruin, we have to go back to the beginning. Section 1. The motive. Poverty and envy. You know, every dark pact in folklore requires a desperate motive, right? Nobody just enters into these agreements casually. For Ajitesh, it was this suffocating, festering jealousy. On one side, you have Ajitesh, running a failing clothing warehouse, absolutely drowning in debt, and coming home to a wife, Sunita, who was just exhausted from raising their 5-year-old son with nothing. On the flip side is his older brother, Suresh. Suresh would roll into town from Lucknow in an expensive car, wearing fancy clothes, and he'd look at Ajitesh with pure pity, saying, "Don't worry, everything will be okay." Ajitesh absolutely hated hearing that. He dreamed of the day he would outshine his brother. And that intense envy, that's exactly what pushed him out the door to find the tantric. Section 2. The contract. The ritual of blood.
So the tantric didn't just cast some generic magic spell. He laid out the literal terms and conditions of a highly specific contract called Cock Tantra. He explained that crows aren't just birds. They act as messengers, a bridge between the living and the dead. If you control them through this ritual, these messengers can grant wealth and success way beyond normal human limits. But like any high-yield contract, the upfront capital is steep. There is a physical toll.
The contract required this very specific, bloody, daily procedure. Step 1, Ajitesh had to cut his own finger. Step 2, mix his fresh blood with grains. Step 3, feed this mixture to the crows every single morning. And you know what? For a while, it worked flawlessly. Within weeks, stagnant business deals went through, money started pouring in, and his business practically exploded overnight. He bought a massive, luxurious house and finally saw his wife smile again. But, of course, there was a catch. The tantric had given him one explicit, non-negotiable clause before they began. If you ever stop, they will destroy your life. This wasn't a warning or a threat. It was a simple statement of supernatural fact. The contract is permanent, and the daily payment has to be met without fail. Section 3. The breach. Complacency and broken promises. Well, human nature is famously forgetful, especially when we get comfortable. Years passed, Ajitesh became incredibly wealthy, and with that wealth came complacency. One morning, he just forgot to feed the crows. Then another day slipped by. The daily ritual downgraded to once a week, and eventually he just stopped completely. Boom, breach of contract. Now, ornithologists have actually proven that crows have incredible facial recognition and can hold multi-generational grudges against specific people. So it's entirely fitting that the debt collectors sent a very targeted warning. A solitary jet black crow began appearing outside his mansion, sitting on his expensive car, screaming loudly every single morning. If Ajitesh tried to approach it, it would fly away only to return to the exact same spot the next day. The grace period was officially over. What followed next was the insanely fast compounding interest of his supernatural debt. Within days, dead crows started appearing right outside his door. Within weeks, the very deals that made him rich completely collapsed, and his business partner vanished with millions. Within months, his warehouse mysteriously caught fire. It was literally as if an invisible force was forcefully liquidating all his assets. Ultimately, having lost everything, Ajitesh had to pack up his family, leave the mansion, and move right back into his old, broken house in the slums.
But the atmosphere shifted to pure dread the second they arrived at their old home. The warning stage was done. Waiting for them were hundreds of crows, covering the roof, the gates, the trees, and unlike that screaming warning crow, these birds were dead silent, just staring, waiting.
Section 4. The Final Collection. Blood for blood. That night, a single crow with glowing red eyes sat outside his bedroom window, staring right at him. Terrified, Ajitesh tried to frantically restart the contract the next morning. He cut his finger, mixed the blood, and waited. But no crow came down to eat. His payment was rejected. Because of this, the curse pivoted. It sought a far more devastating payment. His son, who was now 15, started showing terrifying symptoms. He barely spoke. He spent all day obsessively filling notebooks with frantic drawings of black crows. And worst of all, deep black marks, shaped exactly like claw scratches, began appearing on the boy's neck. In a total panic, Ajitesh went hunting for the old tantric. But when he pushed open the door to the man's hut, he found him half dead on the floor, covered in bloody peck marks, surrounded by crows. The old man screamed at him. "Fool! Because of you, they turned against me too! Now they will take everything from you!" The breach was so severe, absolutely no one involved was getting out clean. Ajitesh rushed home to confess everything to Sunita, but as he did, dark storm clouds rolled in. First 1 crow, then 10, then hundreds, until the sky was pitch black, which forces us to ask this chilling question. What actually happens when a supernatural blood debt goes completely unpaid? The answer came with a scream from Sunita in the next room. Ajitesh ran in to find his 15-year-old son undergoing a rapid, horrific mutation. He was twitching violently on the floor like a dying bird. When the boy looked up, his eyes were blood red, his skin had darkened, and, most horrifying of all, his lips had literally stretched and hardened into a sharp, crow-like beak. The curse had taken hold of his flesh. The boy then lunged at his father, attacking him like a wild animal, relentlessly, until Ajitesh finally stopped breathing. The second Ajitesh died, the final collection was executed. Hundreds of crows burst through every window in the house, swarming his lifeless body in this gruesome display. Sunita could only watch in absolute shock. And then, just as suddenly as the chaos started, her son collapsed to the floor, unconscious, looking completely normal again. The debt had been paid. Sunita grabbed her boy and fled that house forever. And that brings us back to today. Ajitesh's house still stands in ruins in Govind Nagar. The locals will tell you over 100 crows still circle that property, keeping a silent watch, just waiting for the next person desperate enough to try and cheat fate. When we look at the horrific price Ajitesh ultimately paid, losing his wealth, his life, and nearly his son, we're left to ponder one dark, lingering question. Is any amount of wealth truly worth your soul? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.
Please like and subscribe Horror channel.